Right, my name is Matt Schwegman. We're just talking about estate planning today. Why do I need estate planning? Just a disclaimer first. A lot of these don't apply to this presentation, but I added one. Of course, my company, Compose Financial, is not a law firm, and I am not an attorney, and none of this should be interpreted as legal advice. I mean, if you're unsure about something we talk about in here, always defer to go seeking legal counsel and help there. This is, purely informational, and all the sources I pulled it from I believe to be accurate at the time I pulled it, but a year from now it might not be accurate, so just keep that in mind. All right, so on the introduction, we're just going to talk about some common estate planning misconceptions. We're going to talk about who pays federal estate tax, and because there's not many people pay it, is estate planning still necessary? Yes. We're going to talk about asset transfers, some misconceptions with how stuff passes through probate, and if you die intestate, and if you die with a trust. We're going to talk about the different rules for ERISA plans, retirement plans, and IRA assets. So they're covered by different regulations. So Matt, you need to think about how you assign beneficiaries for those assets. And so we're going to talk about the important estate planning tools. The top 5 really are the individual accounts you can name outright, you can name beneficiaries on, wills, power of attorneys for finance and medical decisions, advance directive, and trusts. And you'll notice that whole life insurance isn't listed as a tool there, and we'll talk about why that is. And lastly, we'll talk about Everplans, which is a digital estate planning tool that you can find online. It's a recent startup that has a good service online that will help walk you through your estate plan. All right, so we're going to talk about the federal estate tax and why, even though it is not likely that you'll have to pay any estate tax, why estate planning is still necessary. So the majority of Americans, 99.8%, or 998 out of every 1,000 estates, pay no estate tax. The estate tax exemption, and the reason primarily is the estate tax exemption is $5.45 million and $10.9 million if you're married. So as long as you have less than that at the time of your passing, you're not going to pay any estate tax. Most people's estates are under that threshold. And even if you're at retirement and you're at 10 or 12 million, likely by the time you pass, as you're withdrawing down, you're going to get under that threshold. So that's why only 0.2% pay estate tax. And even if you get over that, there are some estate planning techniques where really that limit is probably estates more like $30, $50 million are really the ones paying estate tax. So there's some easy things you can do to get under that limit. For example, there's annual gift tax exclusion. Like if you had that much money, if you're married, you can give $28,000 a year away tax-free to any individual you choose every year. There's insurance planning you can do. There's some life insurance techniques, trusts, and there's whole life insurance that you can use to get rid of lower your estate. So even though you're not going to pay any federal estate tax, estate planning is still necessary. You need to transfer assets according to your wishes. You'll need a will and other planning. Privacy, if you have privacy issues, if you want your estate to pass to your heirs privately outside of probate, that will require estate planning. And then there's also personal asset protection, divorce, remarriage after the death of a spouse, protecting from creditors. All these can be handled through estate planning. And so just some common misconceptions. Wills do not avoid probate. If you have a will, it's still going to go through probate, and it's a matter of public record. Not all assets pass via a will. Most retirement assets these are the majority of people's estates generally, pass via the named beneficiary on them. So you need to really check what beneficiaries you have named on your retirement accounts. Trust assets do not pass via will, and they pass outside of probate also. And then right of survivorship property. So any kind of property you own, with right of survivorship title will pass automatically outside of probate. A lot of people think probate in Texas is a pain, and while I will agree with that, it has become easier in recent years. There's I think in the last 10 years, it's called muniment of title. And so as long as you have a valid will, no unpaid debts except those secured by real estate, and no Medicaid claims against your estate, you can go through a very simple process to go through probate. And then there's also a small estate affidavit. If you have less than $50,000 in assets, you can file a form and go through the probate process. All right, good question. Assets passing outside of probate. It's important for you to track the beneficiaries for assets that pass outside of your will. These include life insurance proceeds, you name your beneficiary on these assets, retirement assets, joint tenant property, transfer on death assets, gifts. You can, gifts once you transfer it out of your estate, they obviously don't go through probate. If you have a partnership, a business partnership, that will pass outside of probate, and trust assets. And so you need to be careful with ERISA versus IRA assets. So your 401k has some different rules versus your IRA that you need to be careful about. So IRA assets versus 401k, stuff that's covered by ERISA versus stuff that's not. Individual retirement accounts are not employer sponsored. They're not governed by this federal regulatory authority called ERISA. So with IRAs, it's simple. Whatever beneficiary you designate, that's who it passes to, okay? With your 401ks, it's a little slightly different. It still has a beneficiary, but the default is that it has to go to your spouse. For your spouse, if you want to designate, like if I was with Christina and I had a 401k, if I wanted to put Lily as a beneficiary, she has to specify in writing that that's okay. She has to specifically disavow that inheritance. So that's where you, so that you can.
Is there a percentage that Lily and Christina would get then, or?
Yeah, so you can do as many beneficiaries as you want, right, and make it a percentage. But that's the difference. So let's think of a couple problems that you could get into. Let's say you're divorced, right, and you didn't change your IRA beneficiary, and you passed away. It automatically passes to your ex.
Wow.
So that's why you always need to make sure you know who's the beneficiary. And as soon as the life event happens, change it. Ideally, if you're going through divorce, your attorney will let you know that situation. And let's think of another thing. Just like we were talking about, if dad remarried, you didn't want everything going to, someone else. Yeah. If you remarry, again, it gets a little complicated, but it would automatically go to that new spouse unless they wrote to disavow or disinherit it. So these are the rules in Texas if you die without a will, if you died intestate. And again, this wouldn't include wills that pass outside, this wouldn't include assets that pass outside probate. So those retirement assets we just talked about. But we're not going to go through every one of them. But for example, if you die with children, but no other relatives, no spouse, parents, or siblings, the children would inherit everything. And Texas is a community property state. So if you have separate property, it gets a little confusing. For example, let's go down to the second to last one, a spouse and parents. The spouse, if you die with a spouse and parents, your spouse would inherit all of your community property in Texas, but all of your separate personal property, meaning property you acquired before marriage or anything else that you can specifically define as separate property, half of that would pass, all of your separate personal property would go to your spouse, and then half of your separate real estate property would go to your spouse, and your parents would get everything else. Again, Texas community property state. You just need to make sure you know what's community property and what's separate property. So now we're just going to go through some of the top estate planning tools. You need a will for the assets that will pass through probate. This helps, leaves your assets according to your wishes. You'll need a separate will for both spouses. Again, Texas is a community property state, so most of it will pass to your spouse, likely, if you died without a will. And then we'll talk about the benefits and detriments of, recently there's been a lot of online wills, websites come up versus hiring an attorney. It's been good in that it's less cost, But you can get into problems if you have complexity, then you should go seek an attorney. If you need someone to help guide you through thinking about your estates, you should certainly use an attorney. Frequency issues, if you're going to have a lot of changes. I mean, I just had a daughter, might have more kids. You need to update your will in each case. If you had an attorney, that's going to be a pretty high fee every time. If you have an online will in a simple estate, it might be easier to do it online. You need to come up with an asset listing regardless, and list all your assets and decide what you want to leave to specific people. And then with attorney wills, the wills I've seen drafted by attorneys, they are pretty specific, and they try to cover it so that you don't have to come back every year. So they'll have a lot of stuff where they leave stuff by generations, so per capita by generations or per stirpes. So it gets a little complex, but if you left something to you want to leave something to your grandchildren, right? And you wanted to leave it in equal shares, like say you had 2 kids, right? John and Jane. John had 2 grandchildren and Jane only had 1. You got to think about if you want to leave a 1/3 share to each, or you wanted to leave, half and half. So that's where you get into this per stirpes. Per stirpes by generation means it gets into I want to leave a 1/3 to each, or I want to leave half to my children, and then once they pass, half will go to that.
Sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone.
That's okay. And so some problems that you can get into with an online will, this is just I've read a lot about it, but one example they use is if you had a stamp collection, for example. You get into trouble when you want to leave assets specifically that you might forget about. So if in your simple will online, you might not be able to customize it. And here's an example. If you had a really nice stamp collection or something, it's okay. If you had a really nice stamp collection and you wanted it to pass to your brother and your sister, and you said, I want to leave my stamp collection 50-50 to my brother and sister, and that's all you put in your will, does that mean they have to liquidate it, sell all the stamps, and they get 50-50? Does it mean if you had 100 stamps, your brother gets 50 stamps, your sister gets 50 stamps? That's where you get into, that's a very simple example. That's where if you have assets that are worth a lot of money and that you want to specifically leave to people, it might make sense to go hire an attorney instead of doing an online will. Does that make sense?
What's the purpose of having a will if it just crosses over to your spouse?
For the situation where you don't want it to just pass right to your spouse, and also in a will, there's other stuff like who cares for your children, guardianship, stuff like that. There's a lot more to a will than just asset pass. And then if you pass and you wanted to name an executor of your estate to take care of affairs, in that interim period, you'd much rather have someone you trust do that than a court-appointed trustee, right? If you died without a will, the court's going to appoint an executor, and they're going to take care of it.
When my dad died, my mom, they had a will, thought they had everything taken care of, and it took my mom almost a year to get all the assets from it, because he held his certain stock certificates, and everything went to my mom, but it was very difficult.
Some other important estate planning documents are powers of attorney and advance directives. You'll need a financial power of attorney that will allow someone to handle your financial affairs if you become incapacitated. It's a simple form. If anyone's trying to charge you a fee for this, I wouldn't do it. It's a state form. It's through our Texas Constitution. It's a link there. It's very simple. You just check the box and appoint someone essentially, and you got to get it signed. I believe you have to have it notarized. And same for the medical power of attorney. It's a state form as well as the advance directive. Medical power of attorney, if you're incapacitated, who makes decisions for you? So medical power of attorney, very important. Advance directive more just lays out your wishes, in certain situations, how do you want your medical decisions to be handled, if you want to be resuscitated, stuff like that. With this document, you need to make sure you understand obviously what you're electing. It's good to sit with your physician, go through it, make sure you understand. They'll be more than happy to walk through it.
Does it come already like with questions and you check them off, or you have to come up with all those things?
No, I
don't even know what I have to come up with.
Yeah, you can go to that.
It's pretty direct.
You can go to that website right here. It will have it on there. But yeah, it's a straight form, and it'll walk you through Do you want
So
to be?
you pretty much go online, you print it out, you fill it out, and then you take it to
Yeah, or alternatively, every hospital or whatever doctor you go to will have an advanced directive form for you, and you can fill it out there. Yep.
Okay.
Because that way you've already made the decision what you want to do with your life, and that responsibility's off the person.
I've always avoided those things because I don't want to die, but
I know.
I'm getting closer to start doing it.
I know. Well, you're too young, but when you get our age, you think about stuff like that.
I'm not that young either, but
That's what they tell me. At least the pressure is off, like Matt.
Yeah.
I have to make the decision.
Yeah, it's not
what
always
I want.
it's not always for the benefit of the person filling out the form. It's also to trust. Another great tool for estate planning. There's 4 parts to a trust. A trust is essentially just an agreement that allows a grantor to designate assets or corpus to be managed by a trustee on behalf of beneficiaries. But you can make changes with a revocable trust. With a testamentary trust, an irrevocable trust, once you put it in there, once you give it away, essentially, you have no control over it.
you can change your mind.
You can't change your mind. Nope. So you just need to make sure what you're doing.
Ever? Never? Ever?
Not with an irrevocable
What's
trust.
the benefits of going?
So, and this is where you get into the estate planning stuff. If you were paying federal estate tax, so a lot of people want stuff moved out of their estate, so they'll set up irrevocable trusts or trusts that become irrevocable. And it's more for complex estates where you're trying to get assets out of your estate. If you have a huge $100 million estate, you can set up certain irrevocable trusts, and again, this is where you have to get an attorney. This gets more complex. You can lower your estate by putting stuff in these irrevocable trusts. If you don't control it, it's not part of your estate. It's not deemed taxable by the government when you die.
So if it's living, you
But again, most people don't pay federal estate tax, so they're not really concerned. That's not a big issue. If you don't have more than $10 million in assets, revocable trust is more than okay, probably. All right? Trust pass outside of your wills, and it's more private. So again, if you have a brother that you didn't want him to see any part of your estate and not know who you're passing stuff to, put it in a trust, he won't see it through probate. Whereas if you said in a will, I want to disinherit my brother, pass everything to my sister, he's going to see that as it goes through probate. Okay? So that's another reason to create trusts. I came into a situation this week when I was meeting with someone. He was creating a trust in case he passed. He was wanting, if he passed and his wife remarried, he didn't want some husband to come and take all his estate that he had built up, right? So he made sure he started a trust, a revocable trust, and if he passed, it becomes again irrevocable, and it can only be used for the beneficiaries he wanted. So that husband can't come and, and do what he wants with his money. Right.
Well, that makes sense. I never thought about all that stuff.
So that's why I said one of the main benefits of trust, is asset protection. That's what I would call asset protection. You're protecting your assets from not only creditors, but also people you don't know at this point in time.
Yeah, because I wouldn't want, if Steve would remarry, I wouldn't want, if that lady had kids, I wouldn't want those kids to get what you and Jen need to get, more money. I wouldn't want that. Well, that makes sense. Well, there's a lot of stuff to think about, isn't there?
It's a lot.
And we get into even more. We're going to get into.
I think somebody's been making plans that I don't know about.
And so whole life insurance is another tool that a lot of insurance salesmen will try to push on people. And again, because most people don't pay federal estate tax, my view is that it's really only good for 0.2% of Americans
Life insurance?
to have whole life.
Okay.
So whole life insurance is a term part. So it's basically 2 parts. It has a term part and it has an investment portion. And they're trying to sell you on the investment portion because it has high fees for them, very high fees. It's likely recommended by a fiduciary who doesn't have your best interests at heart. And there's opportunity costs as well. I mean, there's a lot of new products out there, variable annuities and stuff. A lot of them are tied to specific indices. I've looked at a lot of them here recently with people bringing them to me and saying, "Oh, I got offered this. Is this a good idea?" If you don't understand it yourself and I have to explain it to you, probably not a good idea. Like, you're probably getting swindled somehow. I saw one recently where it was tied to the S&P 500, and you shared in any gain, but you didn't share in any losses. But
That sounds like a good deal.
But you didn't share in the dividends. On page 50, excluding dividends. Dividends are like 1 to 2% a year in the S&P 500. That's a huge. I think that's just like a fee. That's just like paying me 2% fee. It's a big, and again.
Healthy term life insurance is the best thing to get.
Exactly.
Term life.
That's why I say here on the bottom for majority.
And it's whole life is an expensive product.
Yeah. We're talking like
term life is a whole lot less expensive.
Yes, and those are the ones that are like 20 and 30 years or
Yep.
something like
That's
that.
what the term means.
Yes,
Yeah,
I have
you want to do as long span as you can do.
And the younger you do it, the cheaper it is.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
I have mine, but I don't know how many. Okay, but if I got
could probably
it.
get a $500,000 in term life insurance for $20 a month.
Yep. There's a great website online. It's called termforlife.com. Go there, plug in your age, where you live. It'll show you exactly how much stuff costs, but it's very affordable. So I have a 30-year term policy. If I die within the next 30 years, Christina gets the amount of the term that I've designated.
Oh, okay.
Now, one thing that's important, you want to look for a level term, a level price. So
Right.
it's $20 for 20 years, and it's this base amount, and that's it.
Those things never change.
They never change.
That-
You want the
Dollar amount. Never.
Yeah, ours is less than
right.
$500 a year for both our policies, and it's locked in for 30 years. So actually, if you think about it, that cost gets cheaper because inflation, it stays the same, and all your other costs are going up.
Mine.
If you have term from them, they're probably pushing whole life on you.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So you need to check it.
Will it stay in the policy whole life? I mean,
I don't even know what the
They
factors
use some
are.
funky names for it.
Again,
Okay.
there's a million different products now. They're all called something new every year to confuse
how
people.
would she find out what she has?
She probably has a cash value.
If it has a separate, if it says like you have a value today in it, with term you never have any value. You pay them money, you never see that money again. But that's fine. You're using it for income replacement. It's fine.
It's risk.
Right. You're using it to
avoid risk.
With the whole life. There's an investment portion, and you build up a cash value. So if you have a value, like if it's worth something to you today, you could cash it out.
Yeah.
That's a whole life policy, and I'm telling you, it's probably not in your best interest to have.
Basically, what they're
Another great reason to not smoke. The policy differences are pretty big for if you smoke or not, if you use tobacco products.
So the term policy too is something to do like on top of an employer policy?
Yeah.
So this is another, so this is a great question, leads me into my next thing. So employer policy, for someone like you, employer policies are group plans. So if you think about it, you're in a group with a bunch of people older than you, generally, right?
Yeah.
That's actually, if you want to buy up in that employer plan, it's almost probably 100% of the time for someone your age, more expensive. It's cheaper for you to go out and get an independent term policy because you're grouped with a larger pool of people that are older than you. And also, if you ever leave that employer, it doesn't go. It does go. You'll get a call from whoever their insurance plan was, and they'll try to sign you up for term insurance, and it's going to be more expensive too than if you had got it on your own. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So generally always better to get it if you're young outside of your employer.
Yeah. Okay.
You'll have to come and they'll come and do a blood test and do all your physical and stuff
I've
like
got
that.
a term policy outside of my work, but I also got one inside my work that I could get even though I wasn't, I had some health things that would have prevented me from going to the open market, but I could join that group one.
Right.
So,
that's being said too. If you have a specific medical issue, a lot of times
Get it anyplace else. At least
you're
you can
defaulted
still
to your
get some
employer,
additional.
right? Yeah, exactly. Good
There's
points.
so many pros and cons to all of this.
Yeah.
And your situation.
You're like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, clears it up.
Everplans. This is the last slide. Everplans is a digital estate planning tool. It's very affordable. It's $75 per year, and it's free for my clients. it lays out all the stuff we talked through. It's basically a to-do list, and it will bunch of a lot of information. They have like 2,500 or 5,000 articles, I think. If you have any questions, there's a bunch of. It's a great resource. You can attach your wills, your trust documents, your insurance policies to it. Accounts and passwords. What happens when you pass and your kids or whoever doesn't know how to get into your accounts to pay your bills, your utility bills, even stuff like that you might not think of. It walks you through health and medical information, advanced directives. You can get those documents off Everplans.
Better yet, how to get in there to get that money.
Right. Because the bills keep coming in.
Yep.
And so, and it lets you, so there's different sections. You might not want your children to see, or you might not want your brother to see your financial section, but you might want him to see your medical section. You can assign your brother to that specific section, and they call it deputies. You can assign deputies a certain section you see, and they have read-only access, so they'll have access to it and they'll know your plan.
So what do you do? Scan in, like if you have a will and a trust, do you scan those in?
Yeah.
To those placeholders?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a section, and it'll say, it'll walk you through what it is, and if you need one, it'll have a resource for you to go create one. But if you already have one, it says attach here. You attach it, and you're done.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And if you like to have an advanced directive, like you were talking about a while ago, they told my mom she has one. They told her to put it on the refrigerator. Because if an EMS person comes in and they want to resuscitate her, and she doesn't want to do that. So
Somebody who has medical problems, you put your med list on the refrigerator.
yeah, that's a really good idea.
Because the ambulance people, when they come, they know to look on the refrigerator.
Yeah, they do. That's what they tell my mom.
They will look for stuff like that.
And what is it?
If you take a lot of medicines, like Richard's a diabetic.
Yeah, for the diabetics for sure.
Someone who, if EMS is called, an ambulance, they come to your house, they know to look on your fridge for emergency instructions.
Or if your kids had any special medical needs, and you got in trouble, that's another good.
Talk or whatever.
I don't have that problem yet. So on that I'm fine.
Yeah, thank goodness. But if you did.
Yes. No, it's good to know all those things.
I never would have thought about that, but that's what they told my mom when she signed her directive, to not resuscitate, because the EMS is going to come in and do what they got to do. I mean, try to save you, but since she had that, they said just stick it up on your refrigerator.
They know to look on your fridge.
They do.
That's it. Any questions?
A lot.
Aren't you glad you came?
No, I don't know.
Yes,
Well, I am.
I know.
Yeah, I'm more
She's not. We're gonna
confused.
cut that part out. She's not glad she came.
No.